Hello my friends, I'm Bianca, the ticking time blonde. Today we have James in the studio to talk about his free watch collection. Welcome to the studio, James.
Thanks very much for having me.
Great to have you in. So, having a glance at your collection, you've got quite an impressive free already. I assume like a lot of collectors start at a more entry level, but you've just gone to something quite defined.
Yeah, well, look, thanks for saying so. The first watch that I bought was the AP. I'll grab it. So this was the first one. I got this in 2018.
Okay.
It wasn't actually the plan to buy this watch. I'd been looking for sort of actually several years about getting my first real timepiece.
Yep.
And there was a few in contention, and it was on a trip to Singapore. I was going out to buy a Pepsi, so 16710. There were a few other pieces that were sort of contemplation, and it was this 15400 and the ceramic Daytona, but they were effectively double the price of what the Pepsis were going for at the time. So I'd saved enough money to get a Pepsi. I'd gone on this holiday to look at watches, really.
Yeah, as you do.
As you do. Ended up in an AP boutique. Back in 2018, it's not as if you could pick these up, but they're certainly not as scarce as they are now. They didn't really have anything on offer or on display, but I just got talking to the salesperson there, and I think it became clear to her that I sort of kind of knew what I was talking about.
Yep.
So she said, why don't you come upstairs, we've got a few pieces in the safe that you can take a look at. No suggestion that I could purchase anything. So she pulled this out and a 15202 IP that were wrapped and sealed, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. So I just inquired about like, what's the wait period to try and get something like this? And she goes, well, this is actually something that it's meant for someone, but they've not picked it up. So if you want it, you can have it, but you sort of have to take it immediately.
Okay,
So
no pressure.
Yeah, so I was prepared to spend half as much as what this cost on a Pepsi, but thought, well, I don't know if this opportunity is going to come up again. So just pulled the trigger then and there, and then that sort of started the train running on several other pieces. But that's just how the first one happened, and it wasn't really intended to be the case that I would start with the AP.
So when you're in the sales shop with the sales executive, what was it about this watch that really sold it to you?
Well, it's two things really. It's the bracelet, it's the dial. The bracelet is just second to none and really class leading. And the dial, the tapisserie dial, there's just nothing else like it.
So originally you did want the Rolex. What role did the AP play prior to making the decision?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Royal Oak is it was the first, and everyone else is playing second fiddle. The Gerald Genta 72 designed, first ever luxury sports watch. That whole story and history really attracted me to the Royal Oak specifically. This was, the modern interpretation of that at the time. So that really played a role, and I just enjoy having that. And also, compared to Rolex, it's something that, at least in Australia, not a lot of people know.
So you ended up purchasing the 15400, but I can't help but notice you have something else on your wrist. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, look, I also, several years later, managed to pick up 15202. Not IP, but in steel. Picking this one up after a couple of years, this became sort of an aspirational grail after getting the 15400. So I became very focused about doing whatever I could to get one of these. Picking that piece up in Singapore and being in discussions at the Singapore boutique about what I could do to be offered this, they were actually allowed me to go on a manufacturer tour on my honeymoon. Picked that one up in 18, and then in 2019 on our honeymoon we went on a manufacturer tour to AP and got to see the entire museum, history, the pantograph machine that does the dials, and some unreleased pieces and some pieces from like the 17th, 18th century that were just insane. The following year in 2020 is when I picked this one up. This is the piece in the collection that I will never sell.
So does your partner get into this as well? Did she go to the manufacturing
Yeah,
side?
reluctantly at the time. She will listen to me talk about watches incessantly. She's very patient like that, and she was reluctant to spend an entire day talking and walking around watches, but she loved it. We had a great time, and we went out to lunch by the lake, and there's just fantastic people we got to meet, and it was just an incredible experience.
So how do you wear your APs? Are there certain occasions that you wear these, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, for over a year, the 15400 was my only watch, so I'd wear it every day to everything. And that's actually probably a good segue into the Rolex, because pop that down. That's a good segue into the Explorer, because I was wearing that every day and didn't have a real casual watch to just wear around the house, play sport in and just wear all the time, because I'd get home, take the AP off, whereas this I just wear for weeks on end, in bed, in the shower, doing gardening, painting things. It's just an everyday comfortable watch. This is a piece I picked up in between, so in 2019, and I just love the dial. I love the symmetry and the simpleness of the dial. I quite like it's kind of understated for a Rolex too. It doesn't scream, I've got a Rolex. It hasn't got a big ceramic bezel. For me, it's sort of comparable to just wearing a sub, but a dive watch, I've got no business wearing a dive watch, I feel. So this, I think, is just more me, and it's a 36 mil.
Yeah, it's a smaller face. You don't mind the smaller?
I'm plagued with having quite small wrists. 36 to 39 mils, probably a nice sweet spot for me. And yeah, I quite like the proportions of this, and it just wears really well. I did pick it up secondhand. It's, I think, a 2006 watch. The reference is 114270. I quite like the fact that when I bought it, it was used and had some sort of hairline scratches on it, which meant that I didn't feel too bad wearing it.
You don't mind a little bit of a size difference? I mean, between the 15400 and your Rolex is quite different.
There is a significant difference between the two. I think the 5400 wears larger than the 41 that it is because of the integrated lugs.
So you did mention that you wear the 15400 daily, and then we have the more traditional size. So is that hard to transition between the two?
Yeah, I certainly got used to wearing the 41 mil AP, and I suppose it's going from one extreme to the other, 36 on the Explorer. It's quite the change, and I suppose I've got the medium 39 on the Jumbo, but honestly, that's probably the most comfortable watch in the collection, the Explorer, and because of its size, at least for my wrist. I certainly enjoy the almost vintage proportions of wearing a 36.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing the stories behind your Rolex. What is our last watch over here?
So this is the most recent acquisition.
Nice.
This is a piece I picked up in 2022. It was one of the novelties of the Patek collection in 22. It's the 5226G in white gold. I sort of bought it to mark the birth of my first son.
Lovely sentiment.
Yeah. But in reality, it was just an excuse to buy another watch. But and it's crazy to think that was almost 2 years ago now. The release was kind of shocking. In the Calatrava range, it's a really modern design, almost harking back to the a Leica M3, which I also used to have. Texture on the dial, which I think is quite cool. Having the Clos de Paris on the mid case and the lugs that don't attach to the mid case and sort of float gives almost an Art Deco with the flatness of the lugs. I just think it's a really modern, interesting design, and really a departure from the Patek designs in the Calatrava range at least.
Yeah, for sure.
At the time. So as soon as it launched, I was just particularly attracted to it and managed to secure it within a few months, and I wear this one a lot. And I only last week just picked up this red strap on it, which is
very loud.
It's loud. It's a bit of fun. Not everyone loves it, but I think it's just a bit of fun and just something different. And for me, I think it really draws you into the dial and the depth in the dial, wearing sort of a slightly darker strap.
So do you like to change your strap, mix them around a bit when you're wearing your watches?
Haven't particularly. I wear the Rolex on sort of a NATO occasionally, and I've got a leather strap for that too, which is kind of fun. But this is sort of the first dress piece in the collection. So the first opportunity really to sort of play with straps. And it comes on too, sort of a tan calf. I really only wore it on that, and it comes on almost like a canvas black one as well, which I don't wear as much because it's just less fun.
For a young gent, you have really honed in on a top tier collection. I mean, a lot of enthusiasts, they start at more of an entry level. So how did this all begin for you?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the collecting ethos has really been, well, almost by chance, buying one piece a year. So really having sort of a targeted thought out process about what piece I want to sort of, not even to mark a specific occasion, but just rather than buying something because I'm into it at a specific point in time or because it's interesting. I guess my collecting ethos has really been to buy a watch a year, and I've sort of done that now for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
Started off sort of inadvertently because that was all I could afford. particularly starting off with the 15400. But I really wanted to have a conscious approach to the watches I buy and not just buying watches frivolously. And I'd rather buy, one AP rather than having sort of several Grand Seikos or something like that. And another real focus is buying quality over quantity and really building a collection that will stand over time rather than buying a lot of watches, flipping a lot of watches. I quite like the idea of purchasing a watch, wearing it, building your own history with the watch, having it be part of the collection for a long time.
Now, I've spoken to many watch enthusiasts. They all have a wide range of philosophies they stick to with their collection. Is there something that you go by that's unique to you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the two main things are, the watch has to be significant historically or some sort of history that I can connect with.
Okay.
And then design aesthetic would probably be the other. As far as, movement and complications, I mean, you can see these are all three-handers and I don't have any complicated pieces in the collection yet. Also having a collection where, not having a watch that does the same thing as another watch in the collection.
Okay.
Now, I appreciate I do have two APs that for all intents and purposes are the same watch to most people, but I just don't feel like I want to part with the first watch, really. I don't particularly feel like I want to part with the 15400. In terms of a collecting ethos moving forward, it's collecting things that do something different, that have an interesting story and history behind them, have a design aesthetic that appeals to me, and that's really simple, balanced, symmetrical, with a bit of interest in the dial.
So looking at your collection in front of us now, would you say that your style is more sporty?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly leans that way now, as I've only got the one dress watch, and even that's not particularly traditionally dressy. I do have a couple other pieces on their way that will hopefully balance that out.
Yeah.
But I do think I do tend to lean more toward a casual or sporty aesthetic. But having said that, I think the dress watches that appeal to me are unattainable at this point in time. Yeah, hopefully I'll be able to balance it out soon.
So when purchasing a watch, have you always gone in the boutique and seen them face value, or have you ever made a challenge to purchase online?
Yeah, all of these I've got in person.
Yeah.
A couple more that I've got online. But I suppose that's a challenge, and particularly with buying secondhand and living where we do, it really is a challenge to collect unique pieces, and you really have to travel to Europe or Malaysia, Singapore to get really interesting pieces.
So with your collection now, would you say that you're quite happy and content with how it's looking, or any proposed changes?
Yeah, well, I don't know if anyone could ever say that. And even, after getting the jumbo that really was and still remains the Grail, I still have a lot of watches to buy. And I'm hopefully trying to maintain the one watch a year mentality and slowly just build a collection that way.
So you spoke of a couple of watches on the way. What are they?
Yeah, so in 2021, I ordered, or commissioned rather, a Voutilainen. The timeline for that watch was 3 years, was to be expected sort of in the next few months.
Yeah.
But has been pushed out, and I would expect sort of sometime within the next 12 months. But that's the next piece, and that will be the biggest piece in the collection, and will be more of a traditional dressier style. And that piece, unique amongst these, will be where the movement is the focus of the watch. That's a pretty exciting piece coming up, and hopefully will be the next one in the collection.
So acquiring a bespoke Voutilainen would be the grail for many watch collectors, I'm sure. So where do you go from there?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's a great question. I think I don't know that I can go too far from there in terms of price. The next thing for the collection would be to introduce some type of complication. There's only been one standout in my mind for several years that I'd go to, and that's sort of a vintage piece. Or can I say vintage in the 80s? Maybe not. It would be a Patek 3940, which is a Grand Comp perpetual calendar. I prefer a clean, simple dial, and that's quite a busy dial, but it's a really balanced dial, and I think the best, in my mind, perpetual calendar that you can get. So that has always been a piece that I've held out in my mind as being one day to get a 3940. Again, great size for me, so I think would wear really well. And a piece I think that I would introduce in a rose gold, because the Voutilainen will be white gold.
Yeah.
So it'll be the first non-white metal piece in the collection too. So that'd be something different. and would sit sort of uniquely in the collection. That's always a piece I've held out in my mind as being something to introduce at some stage or another, but the Voutilainen will be the grail.
So you've been a part of the local watch community. How has that experience been for you, or how have you even benefited from attending?
Yeah, well, the community I think has grown massively from when I started back in sort of 2017-ish era. Collecting watches can be a pretty lonely hobby if you don't have anyone to share it with, and my wife will only listen to me for so long. It's been great, I think, and I really enjoy talking about watches with like-minded people. I don't so much enjoy talking about my own watches because I buy them for me, really,
Yep.
and I feel slightly uncomfortable sharing my own watches, but I like talking about watches generally. So the community in Perth has grown massively. The education around watches and the content available online has also grown massively in the last 5 years. So, you know, attending these get-togethers, functions with so many people that know so much is just awesome. And you get to see pieces, particularly living in Perth. We don't have all the boutiques. We don't have pieces available that you can just go and see. So getting to experience collections that are vast and seeing watches that you would never see is great.
James, absolute pleasure to have you in the Free Watch Collection studio today, so I thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
And guys, please tell us what's in your 3-watch collection. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe, check out our other content so you don't miss out on the next 3-watch collection.